vaccine requirements for all military personnel. We're going to be talking about that decision as well as the situation in Afghanistan that some would argue is worsening by the second with some Taliban encroachments in some areas of the country as U.S. troops withdraw. To discuss all of that, I'm being joined by Bryan Bender. He covers the military, all things Pentagon for Politico. Bryan, thanks for joining us here on Live Now tonight.
Glad to join you.
You know, we were just listening to John Kirby there talk about the vaccine requirement. You know, from what I've been reading, this is not unusual for especially active duty members. They have a whole regimen of vaccines that they're required to get before they join the armed forces. You know, from some of your reporting that you might have done recently, have you experienced any members that are, you know, pushing back against this, that are opposed to this today?
Well, I think the biggest difference between this vaccine or this, looming requirement, it's not going to be required, it looks like, till about mid-September, or sooner if the FDA approves the vaccine. But the only real difference with the whole menu of vaccines that you have to get if you're in the armed forces is how politically charged this one is. So I think there's no doubt that we're going to see some pushback. How big the pushback is going to be, how many troops are going to refuse, how many are going to seek, some waiver or a way out, I think remains to be seen. But there's no doubt. I mean, there's such a debate going on about the vaccine in America that and there's people on obviously very opposing sides of a vaccine mandate. There's clearly going to be problems. But I think overall, the Pentagon's pretty confident that, they've done this before. They've required vaccines many, many times. I remember back in the 90s, the anthrax vaccine was required. And, there were some hiccups to that. But in the end, the military got vaccinated. And I think that will probably happen here, too.
Yeah, Bryan, do we have any idea right now about current vaccination rates in the military with the COVID vaccine? Is there any data on that at this point in time?
I think the last figures the Pentagon put out maybe a week ago were in the 60-some% range, are already fully vaccinated.
I see.
I think that's a little bit lower than adults in America writ large, but pretty similar. So it's that 30-some% that obviously they want to get vaccinated, and they want to do it quickly, and the president has the authority to do it.
Yeah, Bryan, I just want to read from the president's statement today, just in part. He said, "I strongly support Secretary Austin's message to the force today on the Department of Defense's plan to add the COVID-19 vaccine to the list of required vaccinations for our service members not later than mid-September." Is one of kind of the major aspects of this, though, especially at the Pentagon and in the military, about waiting for vaccines to get the full approval from the FDA because it's just under this emergency use authorization at the moment. Will there be some hiccups for the Defense Department to actually enforce this?
Well, I think they really want this to be approved by the FDA because I do think it does remove some potential hurdles, some legal blowback that they might get. I mean, you can envision some troops filing a lawsuit if this thing is not FDA approved, but the Pentagon is still requiring it. So it looks like they're pretty confident that FDA approval is coming, at least for the Pfizer vaccine. And so I think the mid-September date probably wasn't pulled out of a hat. They probably expect that approval will be forthcoming before then, so they can start doing the inoculations. And again, this is not a military-wide vaccination. This is that sort of stubborn 30 to 40% that have decided they don't want to get the vaccine or they don't want to get it yet. They want to wait. And, that's reflective of America. The military reflects the American people. That's how we want it to be. And so it's not really surprising that, they have that same number or percentage of people that they have to work on.
Yeah, I want to just transition into another, obviously, huge military-related topic, and that's the U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan that is supposed to be final and complete at the end of this month. Right now we are hearing some really, terrible news, especially in, northern areas of Afghanistan where the Taliban have made just really sweeping gains and encroachments there. Not, in just very, very small districts, but large districts and provinces as well. They are making moves. Have you talked to any of your sources where they might have thought this is happening faster than they would have anticipated?
I do think there are those who are probably a little surprised by the pace of the Taliban's offensive, and at least in some areas, how quickly the Afghan government and the Afghan security forces have kind of either crumbled or just fled. But this is a disaster that was predicted. I mean, this is unfolding pretty much the way the military was warning, the intelligence agencies were warning, all kinds of experts were warning, and the president and his top military leaders knew this was coming, and so it's not really a surprise. But if you look at the map of Afghanistan, and there's some really smart people who are tracking every nook and cranny and who controls what district, and it effectively looks like the Taliban controls the country. I mean, there's obviously big pockets they don't control. What remains to be seen, I think, is what does control really mean? A lot of these areas are not very well secured. There's not a big government presence to begin with. So, I think a month from now, which unfortunately or fortunately is the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, we'll probably have a better sense of whether, the Taliban could really take over and topple the Afghan government, or we're just going to be in a new norm where the Taliban is a force to be reckoned with, which it has been, by the way, forever, basically. But you look at the map; it doesn't look good. But again, it's not really that surprising.
Yeah, and I had been, kind of researching, some of these intelligence assessments that have been reported about when possibly, Kabul might fall. According to U.S. intelligence assessments, they say, 6 to 12 months. What are your, sources saying? Do they think Kabul will stand or Kabul will fall?
Yeah, I think there's probably debate going on in some of these intelligence agencies. But there's no doubt there's a lot of folks who've been watching Afghanistan, who've served there for years, decades now, who don't think it looks good for the Afghan government. That if the Taliban really wants to keep on the move, they probably can. And whether that'll be in a couple of months, whether it'll be in a year, there still is a peace process going on. It doesn't seem to be front and center anymore. And if you were the Taliban, why would you want it to be? But there still is the hope, the intent, that the international community, led by the U.S. and other countries, can bring the parties in Afghanistan to the table and create some sort of coalition government. I think no one disputes that the Taliban is going to have a political role to play in that country in perpetuity. The question is, is it going to play a little nicer, or is it going to go back to the bad old days where women have no rights, where, as it's been doing, it is basically assassinating, massacring political opponents left and right. We've seen reports of that in recent days. The signs are not good that the Taliban is a new Taliban.
But isn't this in direct contravention to what was agreed upon, though, during the Trump administration? Remember, former President Trump wanted the withdrawal earlier in May of this year. President Biden moved that deadline back to the fall. And so, is this in kind of just direct, opposition to what was already agreed upon by not only the U.S. but international partners?
Yeah, well, this agreement that we originally had with the Taliban that goes back to the spring of 2020 under President Trump, was basically the U.S. would pull out most of our troops in return for the Taliban living up to a couple of promises. That they wouldn't support terrorist groups like they did Al-Qaeda in the lead up to the 9/11 attacks. That they would be part of this political settlement or peace process. That they would not attack American troops. And some of those things the Taliban lived up to, some of them they have not. They haven't attacked U.S. troops, mostly because there aren't very many U.S. troops there anymore. But they have attacked Afghan troops, continuously. and also have been implicated in bombings that have killed civilians. And so that agreement that Trump reached, effectively is dead. I think President Biden came into office, didn't have a lot of options because that agreement was already in place. But at the same time, when he was vice president, President Biden argued, for getting out of Afghanistan more than a decade ago. He was in favor of pulling U.S. combat troops out pretty much for anybody. And he got overruled by President Obama and virtually everybody else. So Biden is just doing what he thought should be done 10 years ago, which is this is not really our fight. We need to be there to go after the true bad guys who might attack us here in the homeland. But solving Afghanistan's, generations and generations of conflict is just probably not possible. And American boys shouldn't die for it. And so Biden is just really following through on, whether you agree with him or not, on what he's always believed. And I think one thing to watch for will be whether he can be convinced on any level, if it really gets bad there, to change his mind.
Yeah.
Does his advisors come to him at some point and say, we got to send some troops back, we got to, bomb the Taliban, we got to push them back? That I think will be something to watch in the next few months. If it gets really, really bad there, does the president feel like he's got to do something, even on a humanitarian level, if the place just becomes a bloodbath? Yeah,
and we've seen, and especially from his remarks in the past, that he has kind of thrown his hands up at this, absolved himself and his administration of kind of the consequences going forward. He's cited the length of time that troops have already been there. He said you can't essentially nation build. We've heard from him time and time again on that. But now though, kind of another angle to this is some of the, I guess, parts of the war are coming here to the United States, and that is those, Afghan interpreters, translators, are essentially granting refugee status now. Some of them are here in the United States. They've kind of expanded the scope of that to who would qualify. And so that it's just kind of reminiscent to me of just, it's very hard to escape this war. We've been there for 20 years, and now some of it is even coming to our shores. What do you make of that?
Well, I think there's pretty bipartisan agreement in Washington that we owe a debt to these Afghans that risk their lives to be translators, to work with or for in support of the American military and European countries and other allies of ours that have been there for so long. And, they're in danger because they were, collaborators, so to speak, in the minds of the Taliban and certainly some of the more virulent Islamic terrorist groups that are still operating in Afghanistan. So, I think it's 18,000 plus, and their families that are seeking asylum, are seeking, safe haven here. I think we owe it to them. I don't think there's any real debate about that. I think the debate really is like, why can't we speed it up?
Right.
The longer these people have to wait there until they get the visa, until they get through the bureaucratic process, the more they're at risk and their families are at risk. So I think the administration is trying to speed that up, but they also want to vet these people. I mean, they want to have a process that gives us, the American people, some confidence that we're letting in the right people. And having been to Afghanistan, I mean, it's not a place that has the kind of sort of government bureaucracy and identification and sort of work history, employment history, et cetera, that we are used to here. So, you're kind of in some cases starting from scratch. You got to figure out, did they really work at that base? Did they really do what they said they did? And is this really their family? And so it's not as easy as just snapping your fingers and saying, here's your visa and get on a plane.
All right, Bryan Bender from Politico, we thank you so much. Any final thoughts? What will kind of, you be watching for in the days and weeks ahead?
Well, I do think on the vaccine, just to go back to the president's decision, the recommendations from the Secretary of Defense that the military be required to get vaccinated against COVID. I want to see if that has any measurable effect on the public perception of whether a vaccine is good, dangerous, or not. And I think once the FDA approval comes, that will maybe be the real game changer in this, if there is a game changer coming, where you might have a significant amount of people who've been on the fence who, decide to go get the vaccine, which, I think all the experts, and everybody picks their experts these days, say is the only surefire way to keep this virus at bay and these variants at bay. So that's what I'll be watching for, is the military's new decision combined with the FDA approval that we think is coming, at least for some of the vaccines, going to change the trajectory of this.
All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Bryan Bender, thanks for coming on Live Now from Fox. Hope to talk to you again. Have a great rest of your night.
Anytime.